Well, there's so much information here. I have a fear of getting lost, but for essay two, you're going to do the kind of thing that for an English major, somebody with a master's in English who's been researching things for years, including your assignments that I put together. Critical reading is just a natural thing, going back and forth between documents and noticing key differences. And what we're going to do for essay two is we're going to look at two stories. One is the story of Gayton Dugas, presented by Randy Shilts, where he's not only patient zero, I believe that's the title of chapter 13, but he also is an evil person, someone who cruelly, almost joyfully and defiantly and knowingly infects people, knowing that what he's giving them is going to make them very ill. And then later on, and it took a while, but this Gayton the demon myth lasted for many years, but later on, the science of epidemiology showed that he is certainly not the first person, the patient zero, and as we learn in the movie we're going to be watching, that has many clips from Gayton's friends, nor was he evil. So Shilts really got him wrong. But how do you write a comparison between the two faces of Gayton Dugas? It's a different kind of reading. It's a very careful reading. You have to kind of weigh each word. And so let me, in a nutshell, this is what's going on. This is how Shilts got it wrong. And I title this Word doc. This will be following the page here that will be in your canvas, that Shilts' migration from the cluster study in a nutshell. That should have a possessive apostrophe. Shilts' possessive apostrophe. I'm not going to change that. Anyway, Shilts is basically responding to, and let me bring that document over, the original cluster study published by the CDC. And this is the one that suggested what is causing AIDS may be transmitted. That is, it's a contagious disease. But they in no way say they know it. They just say it might be. So look at what Shilts does. This is on, I think, page around 146 or so, or 7 in the book. Actually, I have it down here. 147, okay. So Shilts starts off using the CDC language. Gayton could be connected. Now, to connect people is not to say Gayton infected them. It just means that of the first people in the AIDS cluster study where they interviewed people with AIDS, many of them had had sex with each other, sometimes 2 or 3 years earlier. So what they mean is he could be connected. And then Shilts keeps the tone, offered powerful evidence that GRID, gay-related immune disorder, that's what they called it before they called it AIDS, was not only transmissible, but was the work of a single infectious agent. So notice that powerful evidence. It doesn't mean it's proof, it just means that this thing might be transmissible. So in the whole CDC report, and we will look at that, at no point do they say they have proof, but they do say that it looks like this might be a transmissible agent. So that's the first thing. But notice he said could be connected, and in the later part of that passage, he leaves the could or the maybe out of it and says Gayton had infected at least one man before he had symptoms. And then another 2 had contracted it from Gayton. In other words, he infected them too. So he moves from could be connected to Gayton infected them. Now, none of this is true. We learn later that if somebody had sex with Gayton 10 months earlier and then came down with illness, no, Gayton did not infect that person because AIDS takes so long to show up. They say 10 years on the average. Sometimes it's 5 or 6. Sometimes it's more. But not 10 months. So basically, what the point is that we're going to get to is that these people were infected long before they met. But Shilts doesn't understand that. So he takes the could be connected to Gayton infected them. Just keep that in mind. And then here the implication is that the chances that 40 of the first 248 men to get GRID, which is what they used to call AIDS, either had sex with the same man or it was somebody who did have sex with the same man. In other words, there's no coincidence. The chances are zero. The implication is that Gayton infected 40 of the first 248 men to come down with AIDS. Now, what we learn later, because they had the time period wrong, is that all of these people were infected years before they met each other, probably in the early to mid-70s. And when they started getting sick in 79, 80, and 81, that's when the sexual connections were made. But rather than infecting each other, what happened is that you had a huge pool of people who were already infected. So they got it wrong. I'm going to leave that on that. There's just too much data. So what you're going to do is you're going to compare the way Shilts presents Gayton's role in the epidemic to his actual role in the epidemic. Now, the second phase of this is to research Gayton in the book. And all you have to do is put his name in. If you use Gayton, you get 160 matches. This is in the electronic book. If you use Gayton Dugas, you get 36 because Shilts sometimes uses the first name. So use Gayton. And I'm going to want you to review all of the things that the author says about him. It looks daunting. It's like, oh my God, all these references. But in total, it's only 11 pages. You notice he's listed like 10 times on page 47 or something. So anyway, don't be intimidated. That's the other one. And then the third part of the reading is to go into that CDC report paragraph by paragraph and examine the language they have for Gayton Dugas. Well, not for him, but for their study. And you're going to find out, for example, in the first part, you're going to find out that the finding of a cluster of AIDS patients linked by sexual contact is consistent with the hypotheses that AIDS is caused by an infectious agent. That means it suggests it could be. A hypothesis is a theory, but in no way are they saying that these people infected each other. And so that's the kind of careful reading. You have to get into the tone. And what I've done is I've created questions. And the questions will focus you on the tone of the passage. And you're going to find that it's, in no way do they say they know, but they do say that they had sexual exposures. And and they say it's highly unusual that so many of the first patients with what we would learn to know as AIDS had sex with each other. And what we'll find out later is that it's because they were all infected long before they met each other. In other words, HIV had made its inroads. And this is all about the trying to get the tone right between Shilts' certainty, forgive my rummaging around windows here, that Gayton Dugas started the epidemic, and the epidemiologist understanding that it's odd, but we don't know for sure. You know, it looks like a lot of these first patients had sex with each other, but that doesn't mean we know. And I'm going to have to make this a little bit of a messy presentation for a second. Yes. And so we have the movie, Killing Patient Zero, and minute 5 or so to the end, this is about 10 minutes from this segment, will explain how it's, impossible that Gaten Dugas had that central patient zero role that Shilts gives him. And then for me, it's kind of the same segment with more explanation. This line is just does it for me. So when the first 5 cases were reported, June 5th, 1981, there were already 250,000 gay men in America infected with HIV. In other words, all of the people in the cluster study didn't infect each other, but in fact were part of a larger group of people who had long been infected. And so that's where Shilts gets it wrong. And I'm going to go back to that Word document. Is he, instead of understanding that Gaten was one of 250,000 already infected, he makes it believe that Gaten started the disease and he had infected all of these people. And I'll leave it at that. I hope that gives you a good sense of thematic background, and I will provide structured writing assignments and reading assignments that follow from this short video, this kind of mini lecture.